Sometimes you see someone and immediately know they don't belong. Story 1. The bus pulled into the depot at 3 in the morning, its brakes sighing a tired whisper against the damp concrete. I was already on my way home, the night air thick with the faint smell of diesel and something sweet. Maybe the caramel from the vending machine that clung to the interior of the vehicle. The doors hissed open and a handful of passengers shuffled in, their heads bowed, their eyes fixed on the flickering streetlights outside. He was there before I could step over the low vinyl seat, a man in a navy pea coat that looked 2 sizes too large, his hands tucked deep into the pockets that never seemed to move. He stood in the middle of the aisle, where no one ever stood, his back pressed against the metal rail. The coat was frayed at the cuffs, the hem brushing the floor with a soft, almost inaudible rustle. A thin scarf, the color of old paper, looped loosely around his neck, trailing a single loose thread that seemed to dance in the stale air. The first thing that struck me was his stillness. No one else on the bus shifted. The driver's hand hovered over the lever. The woman at the front kept glancing at her watch. I took a seat opposite the window, trying not to stare, but his profile was etched in my peripheral vision. He was looking straight ahead, but his eyes, 2 small, matte black circles, didn't follow the road. They were fixed on something beyond the windshield, something I could not see. When the bus lurched forward, his shoulders swayed in perfect synchrony with the vehicle, as if his body were a puppet attached to an invisible string. When the driver announced the next stop, a half-lit sign reading Elm Street, the passenger in front of me whispered, "He's new, huh?" The woman's voice trailed off, a nervous lilt to it. My curiosity pricked. I lowered my voice. "He looks out of place." The man in the coat turned his head, slowly, as if the motion required effort. His gaze met mine for a fraction of a second, then moved past me, beyond the front seats, past the driver's console, and settled on the empty space where a handrail should have been. His lips moved, forming a word that never left his throat. He closed his eyes. The tension in his shoulders eased, and for a heartbeat, he seemed to dissolve into the bus's dim interior. When the doors opened at Elm Street, the air grew colder, the streetlights flickering like dying fireflies. The man stepped out without a word, his coat flapping against his legs, the scarf unraveling to reveal a blank, pale cheek where a face should have been. The bus driver, eyes wide, glanced at him and then quickly at the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness. A few minutes later, the bus rumbled back to the depot. The seat where I had sat was warm, as if someone had just left it. I turned to look at the aisle. The spot where he'd stood was empty, but a faint imprint lingered on the vinyl, 2 shallow depressions where his boots had pressed. The imprint was not the shape of a foot, but the outline of a single hand, palm down, as if someone had pressed a flat object against the floor and then vanished. I lingered on the platform, the night swallowing the hiss of the departing bus. Behind me, a soft, almost inaudible rustling came from the shadows, a sound like a coat brushing against concrete. I didn't turn. The feeling that someone, or something, was out of place lingered, and the unsettling certainty that the empty seat was still warm made the darkness feel less empty and more watched. Story 2. The waiter at the corner table. I had taken the habit of stopping at the old coffee shop on Main after work, the one with the cracked teal tiles and the half-lit neon sign that flickered open even when the lights were off. It was a place where the town's rhythm slowed enough for you to hear the tick of the wall clock over the hiss of the espresso machine. Tonight, the rain drummed a steady beat against the windows, and the shop was almost empty, just the barista polishing a glass and a few regulars hunched over their laptops. When the bell above the door chimed, a thin figure slipped in. He was dressed in a charcoal overcoat that seemed too large for his frame, the sleeves hanging past his fingertips as if he'd borrowed it from someone else's closet. His shoes were polished to a sheen that caught the dim light and reflected the empty street outside. He moved without a sound, his shoulders slightly hunched, the coat's collar turned up just enough to hide his jaw. He chose the corner table, the one nearest the back wall where the windows framed a view of the alley behind the shop. I watched him for a moment. He placed a single paper cup on the table, its lid cracked, a thin film of condensation gathering in the middle. He did not order a drink. He did not glance at the menu. He simply stared at the empty street, his eyes, dark, almost matte, fixated on something beyond the rain-slicked pavement. The barista, Maya, glanced up from her polishing. "Anything I can get you?" she asked, her voice a low hum over the clatter. He turned his head slowly, as if weighing each movement. His eyes met hers, but there was no recognition, just a vague calculation. He opened his mouth, and a thin, dry sound escaped, a whisper of breath that seemed to pull the air tighter in the room. "Water," he said, his voice flat, almost absent. Maya frowned, but complied, filling a glass and setting it in front of him with a careful hand. He lifted the glass, but did not drink. He held it to his lips, inhaled the faint scent of rain through the cracked window, and then placed it back down with deliberate gentleness, as if the glass were a fragile artifact. He turned his gaze back to the alley, the droplets glistening like tiny eyes watching him. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. There was something off about his posture, the way his shoulders never quite aligned, the subtle tilt of his head that suggested he was listening to a conversation no one else could hear. He seemed to be waiting for something that never arrived. Maya, uneasy now, placed a small plate of biscuits beside his cup. He lifted a biscuit, examined it from the side, then set it down untouched. The crumbs on the plate remained pristine, as though he had never really held it. He smiled, thin, almost invisible, then the smile vanished like a breath of wind. The clock struck 9, its chime echoing through the shop, reverberating against the plates in the rain. The man rose, the coat swaying with a sound like rustling paper. He moved to the back door, the one that opened onto the alley, and paused. I could see his reflection in the glass, a silhouette that was slightly too tall, the edges of his coat blurred like a smear of ink. He stepped outside, disappearing into the night. The rain fell harder, as if trying to wash away his presence. Maya turned off the neon sign, the open light flickering out, and the shop slipped into darkness, save for the soft glow of the street lamp outside. For a moment, I thought I heard a soft click, the sound of a latch or a lock, followed by a faint, almost imperceptible sigh. When I left the shop, the alley was empty, the only footprints belonging to me. Yet, as I walked past the spot where the man had stood, a single, damp imprint lingered on the wet pavement, its shape too elongated, its edge too crisp. I stopped, stared, and felt the cold realization settle in my chest. Some things belong nowhere, and when they appear, they leave a trace that never quite fits the world around them.